people out of the inner cities of America, you have to turn those inner cities into ghettos. So empower Philadelphia's inner city. They never intended to empower Detroit and Milwaukee or Chicago's inner cities. They never intended to empower Baltimore or Raleigh or Durham, Atlanta. They never intended to empower the inner cities of Black America, because had they empowered the inner cities of Black America, it would have been impossible to gentrify Black people. But there's something else I want you to pay attention to. There's something else I want you to pay attention to. There's something else I want you to pay attention to that I want to speak on right now. And that is the fact, brothers and sisters, that in addition to the Kerner report, which I believe is one of the single greatest motivations for Dr. King's assassination on April the 4th, because the Kerner Commission would give Dr. King everything he needed. The Kerner Commission would give Dr. King all the ammunition he needed for his upcoming economic revolution, his upcoming breadbasket campaign, brothers and sisters. So Dr. King had to die because the Kerner Commission report was released. Dr. King had to die because the Kerner Commission report was released. But there's something else I want to turn your attention to. And the other thing I want to turn your attention to is the fact that on June the 12th, 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, the United States Supreme Court, in a case known as Loving versus Virginia, would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis. On June the 12th of 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated, on June the 12th, 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated, on June the 12th, 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated, the United States Supreme Court would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis in a case known as Loving versus Virginia. In a case known as Loving versus Virginia, the United States Supreme Court would strike down all remaining laws that would prevent interracial marriage. Let me say this again. I'm giving you the history of Black America according to the Prince of Pan-Africanism. I'm giving you the history of Black America according to the Prince of Pan-Africanism. On June the 12th of 1967, the United States Supreme Court would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis in a famous case known as Loving versus Virginia. A white man, a European, a Caucasian by the name of Loving would sue for the right to marry a Black woman. A white man by the name of Loving would sue for the right to marry a Black woman. He was arrested in 1958 for daring to marry this Black woman. Virginia had a racial integrity law. The state of Virginia had a racial integrity law that didn't allow Blacks and whites to get married or cohabitate. When Loving married the Black woman, he violated the Virginia racial integrity law. He went to jail for 1 year. He sued the Virginia Supreme Court. He sued at the Virginia Supreme Court and he lost. So he took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. He took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after taking the case to the U.S. Supreme Court on June the 12th of 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, the Supreme Court outlawed all anti-interracial marriage laws in America. On June the 12th, 1967, the Supreme Court outlawed all remaining anti-interracial marriage laws. All anti-miscegenation laws were ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court on June the 7th, 1967. Why is this relevant? Why is this relevant? The reason the Loving decision is relevant, the reason the U.S. Supreme Court's Loving decision is relevant, which gave birth to the modern snow bunny crisis, the reason it is relevant is many white people, especially in the southern states, many Europeans, especially in the southern states, blamed Dr. King for the Supreme Court's decision. I'm going to say it again. Part of the motivation to kill Dr. King came from the Loving decision. The government was concerned about economic revolution, but the poor white man and the working class white man was concerned about social revolution. The government killed Dr. King for economic revolution, but the poor white man blamed King for the social revolution that the Loving decision would give birth to. So one of the reasons white folks became so possessed with undermining Dr. King in the South was they blamed Dr. King for the Loving decision that the Supreme Court gave birth to. Dr. King had nothing to do with it. Dr. King had nothing to do with it. Dr. King had nothing to do with it except for the fact that his I Have a Dream speech, except for the fact that his I Have a Dream speech did say he looked forward to an America where little white boys and little white girls could hold hands. He did say in the I Have a Dream speech on the March on Washington, 1963 March on Washington, he did say he hoped little white boys and little white and black, little white girls and little black girls and little white boys and little black boys could hold hands. That's all Dr. King said. But Dr. King's agenda was not to push interracial marriage. Dr. King's agenda was not to push interracial marriage, but because he fought for desegregation of public accommodations. Any integrationist progress, any integrationist decisions, any integrationist laws would automatically be blamed on Dr. King. So the Loving decision on June 12th of 1967, along with the release of the Kerner Commission on February 29th of 1968 that would give Dr. King all the ammunition he would need to lead his economic revolution, along with the fact that he was moving towards a greater embrace of revolutionary grassroots activism. Dr. King was moving towards a greater embrace of grassroots revolutionary activism. They had to kill our brother. They had to kill our brother. They had to kill our brother. Now, right after they killed Dr. King, Dr. King's murder would ignite 100 riots in over 100 cities. Dr. King's murder, his assassination by the United States government, would trigger over 100 riots in 100 different cities. So America burned in 67 with the race riots led by Detroit and Newark. And then America would burn the next year in 1968 with the race riots that came as a result of Dr. King's assassination. The Dr. King riots. The Dr. King riots would slightly edge out the 1967 riots. The Dr. King riots were considered the most significant social unrest since the Civil War. The 1967 riots were also considered the most significant riots since the 1863 Civil War draft riots of New York. The Dr. King assassination riots were considered the most significant social unrest in America since the Civil War itself. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King on April 4th, they would murder little Bobby Hutton on April 6th of the Black Panther Party. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King